Good morning, everyone. My name is Maya Luria with TMC for Seniors. And this month we are talking about mental and emotional health. And I have Jill Jones here with us today. I know many of you know Jill. She has been a longtime TMC for Seniors volunteer facilitator. And today she is talking about building emotional resilience in difficult times. Welcome, Jill.
Hi, Maya. Thank you for having me.
So today you may be watching Jill on either our YouTube channel or our Facebook page. Please feel free to leave any comments for Jill, and she will answer those after her presentation. So here you go, Jill.
Okay. Well, good morning, everyone, and thank you all for being here today. This certainly has been a difficult year for a lot of us. 2020 was a really rough year, and the pandemic has taken an emotional toll. I've listed a number of things that you may be feeling there, but I'm sure there's more that I've forgotten. Anxiety, uncertainty, our routines were totally upended. We had to change our whole day around based on the circumstances. And some people lost friends and family and are still suffering from grief. So it's been an emotionally difficult time. And that's when it's important to have coping mechanisms, or what we call resilience. And resilience is the ability, if you're under stress for a long time, it's the ability to bounce back, but it's also the ability to adapt to unplanned changes that come about. And right at this point, we're not exactly sure what the new normal will be. Go for it. So the pandemic and the last year of all that stress, it didn't just affect our mood. For all of us over that period, stress, and this is considered chronic stress. Chronic is more than 3 months. So chronic stress actually changes our brain structure. And what happens, here's a couple ways that it changes the brain structure. And I'm sure you're probably familiar with these different functional areas in the brain. I've certainly talked about them enough. But the amygdala is a part of our brain that's the seat of our emotions. And what happens with all this excess cortisol in our system, the amygdala gets larger. That means the individual neurons, the nerve cells, their dendrites get more branches on them, and they form more connections, and our emotions get more reactive. At the same time, our prefrontal cortex, which is the area where we do our problem solving and thinking and our mental tasks, and that's also our impulse control area and our attention span. That we call it executive control sometimes, but that prefrontal cortex is shrinking. It shrinks under stress with too much cortisol. So the opposite happens to the neurons in that area. The dendrites on the neurons shrink. Connections, there's fewer connections, and the actual synapses between the neurons get remodeled. So it's a pretty big change. Same thing in the hippocampus area, which is the center for our emotions, or for our memory. It's our memory hub. The hippocampus is our memory hub, and it also shrinks. The cells the nerve cells get smaller in there, and there's fewer connections. And not only that, some of those nerve cells in the hippocampus die due to the excess cortisol. What happens, the hippocampal cells have cortisol receptors, And those receptors, the right amount of cortisol is important for our memory function. But if it gets overwhelming, it gets too much, then it can kill some of those nerve cells. So you can move forward. Stress changes the way our neurons communicate with each other in the way. It changes the direction of the flow of how one neurotransmitter travels to another neuron. So for example, now this particular study was done during, I think they're collecting a lot of data during this time period in 2020. And this one was not done right in that time period, but some other information came out because they're continuing to collect information about the emotional impact on the brain. In this study, it involved college students. How are college students handling stress? And in a student that was unstressed, you could see that the prefrontal cortex there was in charge. It had more control over what the brain was doing. So the direction of flow was from those executive functions toward the rest of the brain to keep things orderly. But in a brain that was stressed, different story. It was the emotional part of the brain that was in control and sending signals all over the brain. And the way they determined if the brain was stressed is they actually took samples of cortisol in these people throughout the day. So they start taking blood samples about noontime, and then maybe 3 o'clock, and then maybe 6 o'clock in the evening or something. They don't take a sample in the morning because there is more cortisol in our system in the morning. Its job is to wake us up. But as the day goes on, it gets less and less, unless we're under a lot of stress. So you could see what happens when there's too much cortisol in the brain. Okay. The other thing that happens, I said, stress can kill some of these cells in the hippocampus area. Well, what's going on there? There's a gene. It's called the SGK3 gene, and it's turned on to get rid of cells that are toxic. It gets rid of waste cells. It's designed to kill cells and get rid of them. But what happens is with a lot of cortisol and a lot of stress, this gene gets turned on in the neurons in the hippocampus area, and it kills good neurons. And it also what happens is the cortisol alters our genes. It shortens the telomeres so that it causes cell death earlier too. Our cells don't live as long. And the cortisol I shouldn't say prevents, the cortisol inhibits birth of new neurons because it's in this memory hub where we have the ability to grow brand new neurons. And in a healthy brain, we're sprouting new neurons, but with too much cortisol, that gets stopped. Now, what happens in our body, the high levels of cortisol, and we've talked a little bit about this before, but our blood sugar gets elevated. So for people with diabetes, this is really bad. Our immune system gets suppressed, so we're more vulnerable to any kinds of infections, even cancer and other diseases. We get gastrointestinal problems like maybe ulcers or IBS. You might get gastric reflux. All kinds of things happen in the stomach. And our blood pressure goes up, hypertension. So what can we do about all of this? Well, that's why this topic is on resilience. You can move forward. And this is a definition of resilience from the American Psychological Association. Resilience is the process of adapting well in the face of trauma or tragedy, threats, or other significant sources of stress. The process of adapting well as bouncing back. So sometimes the changes could be permanent and we have to adapt to them. Okay. So last discussion, I talked about brain health and I had the pillars of brain health. Well, these are the pillars of resilience. What habits will support resilience and make us more resilient people? And the stronger these are, the more resilient the person will be. So the first one there is self-care. And that's, of course, our lifestyle habits. How well we do with nutrition. Are we exercising? Are we getting enough sleep? Are we drinking enough water? Those kinds of things. How are we taking care of ourselves? And then, of course, to be resilient, we need good relationships. We need to know we have a network of people who support us and who we can count on, somebody we can talk to when we're feeling stressed. Mindfulness here means just being aware of what you're thinking. It's an awareness of what you're thinking and doing rather than being lost in your thoughts and mind wandering. Self-awareness is an important one. It's, are you living according to your values? Do you know what motivates you? Do you know how other people perceive you? It's things that you think about when you're talking to another person. For instance, you want to be self-aware when you're communicating with them. How are you coming across? And then the last one, my favorite one, is gratitude. Gratitude happens to be the most important mental habit that has an impact on resilience. So on the next chart, what we're going to do is take a look at resilience in the brain. What does resilience look like actually inside the brain? And this is being studied now, quite a lot of research being focused on this. Well, that first picture there, that picture of the brain, you'll see, maybe it's a little hard to see, but there's different areas that are functional areas of the brain where there's clusters of neurons that are networked together. And these functional areas are also networked, communicating to each other all over your brain. And so the light blue area there, it's hard to tell, but those are lines going back and forth between all of those different functional areas. This is a very big network in the brain. And this is what's happening in your brain when your mind is wandering. It's all these functional areas are communicating back and forth. So when your mind is not involved in a task, you're not focusing your attention on something or working on a task, and your mind's kind of left on its own to mind wander, this network is extremely active. And it was discovered by accident. The way the brain is studied nowadays, and especially for how people do certain functional tasks, what happens in your brain when you're doing certain tasks, they put a person in a scanner and ask them to do a task and then observe what happens. And so they're not just today, they're looking at how different parts of the brain are communicating while they're in the scanner. They're looking at circuitry. They're looking at these functional areas and the information going back and forth, the impulses going back and forth between those networks. It's kind of like in the past, they'd look at a functional area like a hippocampus or an amygdala. That's like looking at a picture. Now it's more, when researchers are observing these people, it's like watching a movie. So it's much more sophisticated. It's like watching a movie of your brain. What's it doing when you're performing a task? Well, what they found was when these people are in these scanners waiting for a new task, they finished a task, they're waiting for another task, they noticed that their brains are really quite active. And it's a huge network. It's a huge number of areas in the brain that are communicating all over the place. And they learned that that was the mind wandering part of our brain, and they call that default mode. They call it, it's when our brain is awake, but at rest. It's not concentrating on a task. So what's happening during this mind wandering time? Well, we're going back in the past and recalling memories, or we're thinking about the future, maybe some plans for the future, or we might be worried about the future. We're also thinking about other people, and it helps us, this mind wandering, it helps us understand in a social way what others are thinking. We're guessing what others are thinking. It's that self-talk and mental chatter that's going on in our mind all the time. And because our default mode network, because our brain is designed to protect us and protect us from harm, a lot of the self-talk is mostly negative. So when we're under a period of stress, especially, we might ruminate and start worrying and have all this negative self-talk. But on the other hand, this network is important because this is where new ideas pop up out of the clear blue, or new innovations. When we're letting our brain rest and not even thinking about a specific task and it's off mind wandering, new ideas might pop in our mind. So it's not good or bad, but it's how we have it, but it's how it's working for us, I should say, and how it's working under times of stress that has to do with resilience. We can move forward. The opposite of default mode networks is our attention networks. Now, the default mode network, they consider that one huge network. With attention, it's a little bit different. They have it broken down into sub-networks. So there's an attention network where we deliberately focus our mind on something. There's another attention network where something attracts our attention. We're drawn to something attracts our attention, rather than deliberately trying to focus on something. And then there's all of our executive functions, like our working memory and problem solving and thinking skills. So all of those are considered part of the attention networks. And when they're active, the default mode network is quiet. They've done a number of experiments on this to prove, they had this as a hypothesis and they've proven it, that the default network is quiet when the attention networks are busy. In fact, the statement is they are anti-correlated. It's a negative correlation, and they say they're anti-correlated. So I like that phrase there. When you intentionally focus your attention, you are in charge of your experience here. And it's important that you have a default mode network that you can manage better so that it doesn't run away with negative thinking and it just drags you down with worry, worry, worry. Because this default mode network, it kind of has a bad habit of interrupting your attention. Whatever you're focused on, it keeps interrupting us. So the idea is to train your attention to manage that default mode network and to be able to reprogram that default network so that you have more, so that you go to more positive thoughts and don't wind up going to more negative thinking. So that's where resilience comes in. And resilience is a skill that can be learned. I know some people are born, they know how to cope with everything, and they seem to be born with resilience. And it's true, our genes make a contribution, but it's also a skill that can be learned by anybody. And in the resilient mind, what we want to have, the ideal, is to have a trained attention, so that that prefrontal cortex, that executive function, is in charge of things. And we'll have tighter control of our thoughts. And then we would have reduced activity in the default mode network. And ideally, we would be able to block any of those distractions or interruptions and have more positive self-talk. That's kind of the goal we're headed for when we do some of these resilience exercises. Okay. And the way we do that is with mindfulness programs. Mindfulness is the way to start building resilience and having that ability to adapt and deal with changes and cope with changes, especially as we're aging. A lot of changes coming our way. So some people get mindfulness and meditation terms confused because people use them interchangeably. Here's the textbook definition. Mindfulness is a state of mind, an awareness of what you are experiencing, thinking, and feeling in the present. It is the opposite of mind wandering. So it's an awareness of what you're doing. Mindfulness meditation is a practice, and it's a practice that trains your attention and reduces that mental chatter. It also drives our brain plasticity in a positive way so that we have positive changes in that default mode network. And there are hundreds of different types of meditation techniques. I'm going to talk about a few of them that are simple and easy to do, but there literally are many, maybe 1,000 ways to do it. So cultivating resilience is a personal journey. What techniques I choose would work well for me may not work well for you. So it really is a personal thing. And that's why I want to give you a variety of things to look at. And you can make the decision what you're drawn to and what may work for you. But one thing for everybody, for sure, at the top of that list, to build resilience, it's important to have good, supportive relationships. People that we stay in contact, people that we can trust. So I know during the pandemic year, some of us lost touch with friends for different reasons. We just got disconnected. So now is a time, hopefully we'll be moving back more to normal times now with the vaccinations. We can get in touch with those people and rebuild some of those good relationships. Another part of a plan that's important is a daily practice of mindfulness, to have some practice that you do daily that's training your attention. And there's so much research to back this up. But anyway, it doesn't have to be a long time. You can start out with 5 minutes a day. Just schedule that time, 5 minutes a day, and I'll show you some techniques that you can do that are really easy. But over time, over a few weeks, you will notice a difference and your brain will be changing. It will be, what we can do is any damage that has been done, we can go back and reset it. We can go back and rebuild those areas of the brain that may be shrunk. Or if that amygdala is out of control, we can maybe reduce the size of that. So we can undo some of the damage that may have been done last year. We also want to use a technique to neutralize negative thoughts and thought patterns. And then the last one is to develop a grateful outlook. It's ideal if you can become a grateful person. And a grateful person has the ability to be grateful and appreciate the small things in life and constantly notice small things that they're grateful for. Okay. So I chose these 5-minute practices. They can be longer, of course, but you can start out at 5 minutes and you'll see results. But these 4, when you look at the mountains of research that has been done on meditation, the controlled studies, the randomized control studies that were done, the majority of them use these types of techniques because they're easy to do, they're structured, you can train people easily, and the researchers can tell if the subjects are doing them properly. Now, in most of the research with each one of these are guided meditations. So they're listening to a recording, they're listening to a voice which is guiding them through the breathing exercises or guiding them through the progressive muscle relaxation. And what they found in 2019, the NIH looked at hundreds of studies. And what they concluded was, you'll see kind of in the bottom line there, that the immediate and sustained positive effects of meditation on resilience are mediated by changes in the resting brain. That's the key phrase there. Mediated by changes in the resting brain. That's that default mode network. So it's literally changing, reprogramming in a positive way, your default mode network. So as we move forward, I have some examples for you of these different techniques. And I won't spend a lot of time on each one because we've gone through some of these before. I've talked to you about the Navy SEALs breath techniques. They call it box breathing, and they use it to stay calm when they're in a chaotic situation. So you can move forward. This is sort of a picture of how the breathing goes. You, for a period of 5 minutes, you can set a timer if you want to. You breathe in for 4 seconds. You breathe in and hold for 4 seconds. And then you inhale for 4 seconds and hold for 4 seconds. Breathe out for 4 seconds and hold for 4 seconds. So to a count of 4, you breathe in and hold for a count of 4, breathe out for a count of 4, and then hold for a count of 4. And you just keep doing that simple exercise. The way the Navy SEALs learned this is they took a group of people who hadn't done any meditation, and they listened to a recording of breathing of how to breathe for 15 minutes a day. So they got started with 15 minutes breathing this way, and after 3 and 4 weeks, they noticed significant changes in their ability to focus, but also they noticed the changes in the brain when they put them in a scanner. Okay. If you want to learn different meditation techniques, I don't know how many of you might be familiar with this. There's a Tucson Community Meditation Center, and it's staffed with mostly volunteers, but they have a lot of guest speakers there. They're located near Speedway and Country Club. It's a very active organization. This is where you can go and learn how to meditate, and you can go and learn or go and practice meditation. They have a calendar of events that's posted online at their website. And you can see every day they have different meditation practices. They'll have yoga, They'll have training classes. Some are in the daytime, some are at night. And it's not very expensive. This is a nonprofit, so they will charge a little bit, but for people who don't have the ability to pay, then you don't have to pay. So I would highly recommend this if you're interested in starting a serious meditation practice and want to hook up with a group. Now this is the one, progressive muscle relaxation. This is very easy to do. You just get comfortable in your space. You can be lying down or you can be sitting up, but you relax your body, just get comfortable and relax. And then you start to place your attention on different parts of your body. And you can start with your feet and just notice any sensations in your feet and just pay attention to them for a few minutes. And then notice any sensation in your ankles. Do they feel tingly or warm? And then you might want to move up to your calves, your calf muscles, your lower legs. How do they feel? And so this is an exercise about noticing these different parts of your body and then relaxing them. And many people do this when they're lying down and going to sleep, because it really does help you relax. And you can move through your whole body, and you can do it again if you like to. So again, I think I used this one last night going to sleep. Okay, next. Loving kindness meditation. This is a very popular one. And it's when you want to send kind thoughts to someone. Now, in my case, I had a friend who underwent brain surgery yesterday. It was unexpected, and it was worrisome. So I must have gone through this dozens of times, and I had her in mind, and I kept repeating these 5 phrases. May you feel safe and secure. May you feel loved and cared for. May you be well. May you be at peace. May you be happy. So you recite these phrases about, it can be a person or it can be a group of people that you want to send loving thoughts to. And as I said, I repeat it over and over. And you can use this as a meditation. This next one is a little bit different now. It's a walking meditation. This is a program that I'm doing at the Yume Japanese gardens. And anytime we connect with nature and appreciate nature, it's so healing, and it helps us build resilience. The Yume Japanese gardens is it's just the next block south of the botanical gardens. And it's a small space. It's only on an acre, but it is a beautiful spot. It's a stroll garden. And so it has different features of what a larger Japanese garden would look like. And so in this case, I took this picture. This is a picture of a koi pond that's there. It's my favorite spot. But what you do is you walk through different parts of the garden, and you stop. There's different places you can stop, little benches where you can sit down and meditate. So you walk and you notice the plants, the configurations, the water features, and then you would just pause and sit for a while and reflect on nature and see whatever thoughts come up. In this case, you can let some thoughts come up and journal your thoughts. So that's another kind of meditation. I spend about, I'm going to say I spend about an hour and a half each time I go there, and I go there twice a week. Another form of walking meditation is walking the Labyrinth. Now, the most beautiful one, well, I think it's the most beautiful one. It's certainly a pretty one, is Unity of Tucson. It's off of their parking lot. Anybody can go there. Just park your car and go over to the Labyrinth, and you walk quietly and just follow the path all the way around and back. And it's so beautiful. The sky's beautiful. The mountains are beautiful. And you really can get in touch with nature. And it can be a spiritual thing. There's another one that I like. It's at Westward Look Resort. And this is the Native American version. It's the Tohono O'odham version of the Labyrinth. They call it the maze. And if you've noticed, some of the patterns, the weaving patterns and baskets that they make is called the man in the maze. Well, that's this pattern. And the Labyrinth goes back to mythical times. It's been around forever. But the idea is it's a way to focus your mind and meditate while you're walking and enjoying nature. Now, this one is about gratitude. And the idea of this little exercise is to train your mind to notice small and simple things that you are grateful for every day. So you scan your environment every day and you think of the small, simple things that you're grateful for. And it trains your mind over time to become more of a grateful person. You see things more in terms of what you're grateful for. So anyway, it's called 3 Good Things. It's very popular one because it's so easy to do. At the end of each day, you just write down 3 things that happened that day that you're grateful for. And you can keep this in a journal if you want to. And the next one, this is another practice of gratitude that some people like to do. It was in a book written by a doctor at the Mayo Clinic. He came up with this idea. He says, think of a person you feel grateful towards that day. And then think of an experience that you had that day that you're grateful for. And then think of something that happened that day which holds promise for the future. So for example, my friend Barbara and I were talking and she says, let's go to lunch on Thursday for your birthday. And so I had that to look forward to. That was something that happened that day that held promise for the future. I added this quote at the bottom. It says, I read it and I cannot remember the lady's name that said it. It was in an article in a newspaper about 5 years ago, but I never forgot the sentence. She says, I have what I want because I know what to want. I have what I want because I know what to want. And I thought that's definitely food for thought. Okay. So this is my last chart. My recommendation would be for you to put together your own personal resilience plan. And you can start out by making a list of some of these practices or some other ones that you might know about. And then find 5 minutes in your schedule and choose a practice to begin. So you can start out small with it, just 5 minutes, and then do that practice every day. And if you don't like it, you could try another practice. But when the one you're doing every day starts to become pretty easy, you could add on to it. You could either make it longer, or you might add on another practice. You might do a few practices in the same day. But, oh, and for sure, I should have added on here, don't forget those relationships, to make a list of friends that you want to stay in touch with, and your list of people that support you. So this will get easier over time, and I hope that it's fun and you see a result. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Jill. That was great information. I love that you can start small and just try and just do, even if it's just one thing, each day to try to get, build up your resilience. I think when we look at the stress component of your presentation, somebody had commented, who knew how much stress can cause that damage to you,
Yes.
to your body and whatnot, and asked a question about sort of self-awareness and how much self-awareness can also cause maybe stress to somebody. So they were asking if you have any tips on how to prepare yourself for what you may discover when you start looking at that self-awareness. Any ideas on how to manage that?
Oh gosh, that's a tough question. I always start with values. What are my values? What are my core values? And just pick 5 and ask yourself how you're doing. Are you really living according to those values? And another angle with that too is to look at how you're living your day. What are your habits? What's your daily routines? And then another idea is to focus on your thoughts. What thoughts are you holding in mind most of the time? I don't remember if I said it, but our mind wandering happens about 50% of the time. So about 50% of the time, our mind's off wandering. You can do little mindfulness moments where you just stop and say, what was I thinking about? And I started doing this, especially when I'm out walking my dogs and my mind's wandering. I'll just stop and say, what was that thought? Was that a healthy thought? Was I judging myself? Was I judging some? So you can, there's different ways of monitoring yourself to become more aware. And it can be a fun thing. It doesn't have to be a worrisome thing.
Sure. Now, I did have, I wanted to share with everyone, because I don't know whether they're aware of it or not, but our partner program, the Core at La Encantada, also has quite a bit on mindfulness meditation. And they actually will be doing that. They'll be streaming today at 11 a.m. So I did just want to share that because Amanda Freed does a wonderful job in guiding you through some mindfulness meditation. So if anyone is interested and doesn't have the link for those, it's actually the same link that you used today. But if you wanted to go back and watch any of those at any time, just let us know and we'd be happy to send you those links. I had a comment here that somebody is very grateful to you, Jill, for all your presentations.
Oh.
So I wanted to share that. I had somebody else that says they're new to Tucson, and so they don't have children here or that many relationships in Tucson. And so if relationships are really important, what is she missing out on by not having them yet, while she's in Tucson, I guess. And obviously this year has been hard for everybody with, being much more isolated. So that I'm sure that's part of where this is coming from.
Well, it depends on when you move to a new area, you're always in a situation where you're going to be building new relationships. And it kind of depends on the activities, the things you like to do. So if I knew more about what you like to do, the one good thing about Tucson is there are many social groups out there. Right now, a lot of them are on Zoom, but you can even Google whatever you like to do, book groups Tucson or something, bike clubs Tucson or meditation groups Tucson. I mean, that's probably one way I would get started, is finding a group that had similar interests.
Yeah, and we definitely do have quite a few groups, and you shared so many different ones today. I know my sister loves Labyrinth, so
Oh,
that's been something she has been traveling around, and I hadn't seen the Unity one before. So I was actually thinking I want to make sure she knows about that because she loves to go, and I imagine when you go to there or to the Yume Gardens, you're meeting other people that have that share those same interests that you also love. So that's another great way to build a relationship.
that's right. You do meet people when you go out and do things like this. You meet quality people. You really, really do.
Yeah. Well, great. Thank you so much, Jill. That's all the questions I have that have come in today. I want to thank you for being here and providing such great tips on how we can stay resilient emotionally. I know this has been a hard year for everyone, and I love that we have some new opportunities, some new tools in our toolbox that we can use for the future. So this is wonderful. We did want to share with everybody that our next presentation will be on Thursday, and it's actually solutions for caregiver stress. So again, more topics that I think are really important as caregivers, how, taking care of yourself and how to relieve that stress is really important. So we hope that you'll join us. It will be at 10 a.m. on April 22nd. If you need more information about that, please let us know. And I'm Jill. We can share your presentation, I'm assuming. So
Yeah.
we'll send that out to anybody who registered for today's class. If you didn't register but you would still like a copy, please give us a call in the office. The phone number is 520-324-1960. Thank you so much, and we'll see you all on Thursday.
Bye, everyone.